Welcome to Human and Time. Settle into whatever place feels comfortable and allow the noise around you to become a little more distant. If these quiet journeys through the past bring you peace, you can gently support Human and Time by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And now, without needing to go anywhere at all, let the centuries begin to move around you. Florence is waking. At first, the city is more sound than shape. A bell moves through the cool air above the roofs, its bronze voice spreading outward from stone towers and church walls. Another answers from farther away, then another, until the sound seems to travel through the narrow streets and across the Arno, touching shutters, courtyards, workshops, bridges, and the upper windows of houses still holding the dimness of sleep. The light comes slowly between the buildings. Florence in the first years of the 16th century is enclosed by walls, a dense world of stone gathered around a river. Its streets are narrow enough in places for the upper stories of buildings to hold much of the morning in shadow. Heavy timber doors face the lanes. Shutters begin to open. Somewhere a cart is already moving, its wheels striking the hard paving beneath it. Somewhere else, an apprentice lifts a wooden bar from a workshop door. The city does not wake all at once. It gathers itself. Footsteps begin to multiply. Horses move beneath loads. A merchant prepares for another day of exchange. Smoke rises from a hearth and drifts briefly between the buildings before disappearing into the clearer air above them. Water waits in basins. Bread is handled and broken. Cloth is unfolded. Tools are lifted from where they rested through the darkness. And beneath all of this, the Arno continues to move. It has been moving while Florence slept. Its water passes beneath the bridges and along the edges of the city, carrying reflections that never remain long enough to become still. Morning light touches the surface, breaks apart, and reforms farther downstream. Mud, current, stone, and water make their own quiet geometry. There is a man in Florence who has spent much of his life looking at things like this, not merely seeing water, but watching what water does. Not merely seeing a bird, but noticing the angle of a wing. Not merely looking at a face, but following the almost invisible passage between light and shadow across the skin. His name is Leonardo. In these years between 1503 and 1505, Leonardo da Vinci is in his early 50s. He has already lived through several lives of work. Florence knew him when he was younger, before Milan, before years spent serving courts and patrons, before military roads and maps carried him through other landscapes. Now he has returned to a city that is familiar without being unchanged, and Florence, too, receives a Leonardo who is no longer the young apprentice who once learned among the workshops of its artists. He has returned with decades of looking behind him. There is no need to imagine him rushing through the morning. Nothing in this journey requires us to invent an hour by our schedule that history did not preserve. The surviving traces of these years offer something quieter and Perhaps more intimate papers, commissions, drawings, civic records, projects, observations, names, places, unfinished thoughts. Enough fragments remain for the world around him to breathe again. Follow one of those fragments. A sheet of paper lies beneath a hand. Paper itself is valuable enough to invite care, but Leonardo does not treat the empty surface as something sacred. To him, it is a place where thought can arrive before it is complete. A line begins. The hand moving across the sheet is the left hand. Leonardo is left-handed, and much of his private writing travels across the page in the direction that has fascinated generations after him. From right to left, forming what we now call mirror writing. There is no need to turn it into a secret. The reason he preferred it cannot be known with certainty. It may simply have suited the movement of his hand. What matters here is the physical fact of it. The nib touching the paper, the dark line of ink following behind, words advancing in a direction that feels unfamiliar to most eyes. The ink itself belongs to a material world. A quill must be cut. Ink must be prepared. Paper has texture beneath the fingers. Chalk leaves dust. Metal point demands a prepared surface. Charcoal can darken the skin that holds it. A compass is cool and hard compared with the softer resistance of paper. Around such materials, thought becomes visible. Leonardo's surviving sheets do not always behave as modern books teach us to expect. Subjects refuse to remain politely separated. Geometry may exist beside a practical note. A mechanical form may appear near observations of nature. Numbers, diagrams, words, curves, bodies, water, and machines can inhabit the same mental landscape. The page is less like a finished statement than a place where the world has been allowed to enter. Perhaps this is why Florence feels so appropriate around him. The city itself is also crowded with things that refuse to remain separate. Religion sounds from bells above commercial streets. Government occupies monumental rooms while artisans work nearby. Wealth moves beside refuse. Fine cloth passes through streets marked by animals and carts. Incense can drift from a church doorway, while stronger odors rise from gutters, workshops, markets, and the river. Beauty here has never required cleanliness. The streets carry the practical remains of thousands of lives. Wastewater moves through open channels. Animal dung collects where horses and other animals have passed. Near places where meat is sold, the smells can become heavy. Along the river, trades that depend upon water add their own odors to the air. Then a doorway opens, and another scent interrupts them. Wood, glue, pigment, smoke from charcoal, the smell of work. Inside a painter's working environment, color begins long before color reaches a painting. Pigments must be handled as substances before they become images. Earths and minerals are ground against hard stone. An apprentice may spend long stretches reducing material beneath a muller, the repetitive movement producing a faint gritty sound. Powders cling to surfaces. Containers hold ingredients that will eventually become flesh, cloth, sky, shadow, stone. A prepared wooden panel weights differently from paper. It has weight. The surface must be made ready before the first delicate transitions of a face can emerge upon it. Layers separate the raw wood from the image that will one day seem almost to breathe. Brushes wait beside oils and pigments. Light from a window matters because the painter is not merely placing colors beside one another. He is studying what happens when illumination touches form. And somewhere within Leonardo's Florentine years, a poplar panel is becoming one of the most familiar human faces ever painted. But here it is not famous. Not yet. There is no glass around it. No distant crowd waiting to see it. No reproduction of it in books, on screens, or in the imagination of people who have never stood before the original. There is only a painting in progress. The woman associated with the portrait is Lisa Erardini, wife of the Florentine merchant Francesco del Giocondo. The work we now call the Mona Lisa belongs to this period of Leonardo's return to Florence, though its creation would not be confined neatly to a single brief moment. For now, let the fame disappear. Look instead at the surface. A face emerges through transitions so gentle that the boundaries seem reluctant to declare themselves. Leonardo's method allows light and shadow to pass into one another without the hard certainty of an outline. Thin applications of paint build gradually. The change around an eye, the corner of a mouth, the turn from cheek into shadow can become almost atmospheric. Sfumato, smoke, like. The word suits what the eye experiences. Nothing ends suddenly. One tone becomes another the way morning mist becomes air, or the way the Arno's reflection becomes water when the angle of light changes. And perhaps the river is already waiting inside that thought. Outside the workshop, Florence has grown louder. The morning has opened fully now. Cart wheels strike the street. Hooves meet stone. Voices pass beneath windows. Workshops have entered their daily rhythm. Somewhere metal rings against metal. Somewhere wood is being cut or shaped. Somewhere cloth is being worked in a city whose prosperity has long been tied to merchants, guilds, skilled hands, and the transformation of raw material into valuable things. Artists belong to this practical economy as surely as other craftsmen do. Paintings require contracts, pigments have prices, wood must be acquired, assistants must work, patrons expect results. Art does not float above the city. It is embedded within it. Leonardo's world contains assistants and pupils, among them Gian Giacomo Caprati, known as Salai, who had been with him since the Milan years. Around a master, work can be distributed through many hands, preparing materials, maintaining tools, grinding pigments, moving objects, assisting with the countless physical tasks that surround the act we later reduce to the name of a single artist. Even genius needs someone to grind the color. The thought is almost comforting. The most celebrated images of the Renaissance still begin with ordinary motions. A hand turning a tool, a brush being cleaned, a board being carried, a piece of chalk wearing slowly down, a window being opened because there is finally enough light, and beyond that window stands a city governed by its own anxieties. Florence in these years is a republic. The Medici are absent from power, and Piero Soderini serves as gonfalonier for life. The long struggle with Pisa weighs upon Florentine politics, commerce, military planning, and access toward the sea. Yet politics does not need to arrive here as a lecture. It can be heard in the footsteps entering government buildings. It can be seen in maps laid across tables. It can be felt in the fact that a painter may also be asked to think about rivers, fortifications, terrain, movement, and war. Leonardo's return to Florence follows a period in the service of Cesare Borgia, when he had traveled as a military architect and engineer through parts of central Italy, surveying land, studying fortifications, observing roads and rivers. These were not separate from the same habit that filled his pages elsewhere. Look closely, measure, draw, look again. A city at war with Pisa has use for such eyes. The Arno, which only moments ago seemed to belong to the quiet morning, is also a political fact. Water carries trade, water defines routes, water feeds land, water can protect, water can obstruct, and in Florentine plans against Pisa, Leonardo becomes involved with ambitious ideas concerning the river and its course. The same current can therefore exist in several worlds at once. To a child on the bank, it is simply water. To a mill, it is force. To a merchant, it belongs to movement and commerce. To a government, it may become strategy. To Leonardo, it is all of these things, and also a pattern worth watching for its own sake. Walk toward it again. The streets loosen as the river approaches. The air changes slightly. The hard mineral smell of the city meets dampness. Light has more room to spread across the open surface. Reflections tremble beneath the bridges. Leonardo's fascination with water would leave some of the most beautiful and persistent observations among his surviving papers. Currents turn, vortices form, water curls around resistance, sediment moves, a stream divides and rejoins itself. There is something patient in studying a phenomenon that refuses to hold still. You cannot ask the river to pose. You must learn while it moves. Perhaps that is true of a face as well. The expression that exists now is already becoming another. A horse shifts its weight. A bird alters the angle of a feather. A cloud changes shape. The muscles beneath skin respond before a gesture is complete. The world Leonardo studies is rarely still, even when his drawings are. A sheet of paper can only hold one instant, yet the line upon it can suggest what came before and what may happen next. And so the river quietly leads us back toward the human face. Somewhere in Florence, the poplar panel waits. The transition around the painted mouth is not merely a technical trick. It belongs to a larger sensitivity toward uncertainty in what the eye sees. Hard outlines are useful inventions, but nature often refuses them. Light does not draw a black line around a cheek. Distance softens. Moisture changes the air. Shadows have edges that dissolve. Leonardo watches those dissolving edges. Then he watches water. Then perhaps geometry offers another language. The pages accumulate, not as the famous codices by which later centuries will organize them, but as sheets, folded papers, notebooks, fragments of working thought. What we now gather under grand collection names once existed much closer to the hand surfaces that could be turned, marked, reconsidered, carried, stored. A small note can coexist with a large question. That may be one of the gentlest ways to approach Leonardo. Not as a man who spent every waking moment announcing discoveries to history, but as someone who repeatedly returned to the act of noticing. There are expenses to remember, materials to obtain, people to meet, commissions that demand progress, problems that refuse to solve themselves, a city outside that does not care whether the line on the page will one day become famous. By midday, the light over Florence has changed. The cooler shadows of morning have contracted. Stone receives the sun more directly. The city becomes brighter and, depending upon the season, warmer. In summer, heat can gather between high walls. In colder months, the same stone that holds heat poorly can seem to return chill through the feet. Temperature changes the work of the body. It changes clothing. It changes how long a person wishes to remain outside. It changes the behavior of materials. And it changes the river. Nothing in this world exists independently for very long. A painter depends upon light. A city depends upon water. A government depends upon roads and territory. A workshop depends upon apprentices. A drawing depends upon paper. And paper depends upon hands that made it before Leonardo's hand ever touched it. This interdependence fills Florence more completely than any monument. Even the grandest civic commission begins with material. In October 1503, the Florentine Republic commissions Leonardo to create a monumental image of the Battle of Anghiari for the great council hall of the Palazzo della Signoria, the building we now know as Palazzo Vecchio. The subject reaches backward to a Florentine military victory over Milanese forces in 1440. But for Leonardo, the commission exists in the present tense of work, a vast wall. Preparatory drawings, figures, horses, movement. The difficulty of translating violence into form. It is strange that a documentary meant for rest should approach a battle, and yet there is no need to enter the noise of combat itself. Leonardo's studies allow us to remain where he remained for so much of the process, before the finished image, where observation is still becoming line. A horse turns, its neck tightens, the structure beneath its skin matters. A rider leans, bodies intersect, expressions change under pressure. Leonardo studies movement, not because movement is loud, but because it is difficult. And nearby, another artist is becoming part of the same extraordinary Florentine moment. Michelangelo Buonarroti is much younger than Leonardo. In 1503, Leonardo is 51, Michelangelo is 28. The The Florentine government will bring their monumental projects into the same civic environment. Leonardo with Anghiari and Michelangelo with the Battle of Cassina. Later generations will find it irresistible to imagine the rivalry as spectacle. But the city does not need spectacle tonight. It is enough to understand that, for a brief period, Florence contains both men at once. Michelangelo's David is already changing the city's artistic landscape. In 1504, Leonardo participates in the committee considering where that enormous marble figure should be placed. Imagine only the material contrast. Leonardo's paper beneath the hand, a wooden panel receiving translucent paint, then a block of marble transformed into a body taller than the people gathered around it. Paper, wood, stone. Different substances asking different questions of the human hand. The committee belongs to civic history, but the marble itself belongs to touch. Its surface catches daylight differently from painted skin. It does not soften into sfumato. It stands solidly in the Florentine air. And then the bells sound again. Not necessarily the same bells we heard at first, and not with the same meaning. Time in Florence is not read only from small private instruments. It is heard collectively. Bells organize prayer, work, civic life, openings and closings. Their sound travels where walls cannot completely stop it. Leonardo lives inside that audible measure of time, while filling pages with attempts to understand forms of movement that have no bells at all. Water does not count hours. A bird does not divide the sky into minutes. Light changes continuously. Perhaps this is why the afternoon can pass almost unnoticed when attention settles deeply upon a problem. A compass opens across paper. One point remains fixed while the other moves. A circle appears. The simplicity of the movement conceals the depth of the question's geometry can contain. Leonardo, who did not receive the classical university education of a humanist scholar, repeatedly sought knowledge through experience drawing. Measurement, mathematics, conversation, and books available to him. He once described himself as an homo senza letter, a man without letters. The phrase should not be mistaken for ignorance. It points instead toward the peculiar position from which he worked. Outside the conventional path of Latin scholarly education, yet relentlessly hungry for ways to understand what he could observe. The hand returns to the page. A line curves. Outside, the Arno curves too. Above the river, a bird crosses an open portion of sky. There is no reason to claim Leonardo sees this particular bird at this particular instant. History has not preserved such a moment for us, but birds are part of the world he studies during these years. By 1505, his investigations of flight are becoming concentrated enough to leave us a remarkable group of notes and drawings. Wings are not magical objects there. They are structures interacting with air. Feathers overlap. Bodies have weight. Movement has consequences. To study flight, one must pay attention to resistance. To study water, one must pay attention to resistance. To draw cloth, One must notice how material responds to gravity. To paint a face, one must notice how light responds to form. The questions begin to echo without becoming identical. This is how Leonardo's Florence becomes larger than a biography. The city supplies him constantly with surfaces, movements, materials, problems, and interruptions. A horse passes. A bell sounds. A river turns around stone. A shadow moves slowly across a wall. An apprentice grinds another small quantity of pigment. A government official carries papers into a civic building. A merchant crosses a bridge. Someone closes a window against the heat or opens one to catch moving air. Somewhere, a wooden panel waits for another, almost transparent layer of paint. And somewhere else, a much larger surface waits for horses and men to emerge from charcoal lines and preparatory studies. The day has not yet begun to close. There is still light above Florence. The river carries it downstream in broken pieces. And on a sheet of paper nearby, another line begins to follow something that has moved before the hand can completely understand it. The movement may be gone, but the page keeps its trace. A curve remains where a wing had changed direction. A few strokes preserve the tension of a shoulder, the fold of cloth, the path of water turning around an obstruction. The hand lifts, leaving behind something smaller than the thing observed, and yet strangely capable of holding it. Around the paper, Florence continues without waiting. The afternoon presses more firmly against the stone walls now. Sunlight reaches some streets only in narrow bands, slipping between high facades and illuminating floating dust before withdrawing again into shadow. A doorway may be bright at its threshold and almost dark a few steps inside. Above, shutters interrupt the pale surfaces of houses. Below, the paving carries the repeated passage of sandals, hooves, wheels, and bare working feet. For a painter, this changing light is not merely part of the day. It is material. A face beside a window does not remain the same face when the sun moves. The forehead brightens and then softens. The hollow beside the nose deepens. The line beneath the chin changes. What appears sharply defined at one moment becomes uncertain at another. Leonardo has spent years noticing such uncertainty. It is there in the portrait slowly taking shape on its poplar panel. The surface itself has been prepared to receive something far more delicate than the wood from which it came. Beneath the visible image lie layers of work that the finished painting will largely conceal. Preparation comes before illusion. The panel must become smooth enough for transitions that may eventually seem almost weightless. And then color begins to accumulate, not in a hurry. The face associated with Lisa Gherardini does not emerge from one decisive application of paint. It develops through patience, thin passages, subtle adjustments, translucent layers in which one tone can influence another beneath it. The physical substances remain ordinary enough: pigments, oil, wood, brushes. Yet under the hand they become skin, distance, atmosphere. Leonardo's sfumato depends upon refusing the kind of hard boundaries that the mind often wants to impose upon the world. The eye sees transitions before it sees explanations. A cheek turns away from light without announcing exactly where illumination ends and shadow begins. There is something peaceful in that refusal. The city beyond the room is full of boundaries, walls, gates, property, guilds, offices, territories contested in war, yet the painted face seems to remind the eye that nature itself is rarely so certain. Smoke does not end at a line. Mist does not. Light does not. The river does not. Even a thought, once it begins to move, tends to enter another. A brush is lowered. A sheet is reached for. The change from painting to drawing requires almost nothing in physical distance, but the mind may travel very far. On paper, Leonardo can test what a wooden panel asks him to approach slowly. Geometry can be repeated. A mechanism can be altered. A figure can be drawn again with the weight shifted slightly. A line can become the beginning of another line. A compass opens. Its metal points touch the surface. One remains fixed. The other moves through an arc. The circle closes where it began. There is a satisfaction in forms like this because the hand can make them obey principles more readily than water, flesh, or wind. Geometry offers a kind of stillness. It allows motion to be contained within proportion. Leonardo's relationship with such knowledge is shaped by the unusual route through which he reached it. He did not pass through the classical university education that might have trained a scholar deeply in Latin from youth. His description of himself as an homo senza letterv, a man without letters, belongs to this awareness of standing partly outside the conventional learned world. But being outside one doorway can sharpen the desire to find another. Books enter his life. Texts in the vernacular make mathematics, architecture, mechanics, and older traditions accessible through routes more comfortable to him than formal Latin scholarship. Euclidean geometry becomes something not simply to read but to draw. Architectural ideas connected to Vitruvius enter a mind already attentive to proportion, structure, movement, and the relationship between the human body and constructed space. A book resting on a table has its own physical presence, paper stacked and bound, edges worn through handling, ink pressed or written into surfaces, pages that resist slightly as they are turned. By the beginning of the 16th century, printing is already part of the intellectual environment of Italian cities. Manuscripts have not vanished, but knowledge can circulate through printed books in ways earlier generations could not have experienced in the same form. Florence is a city of hands, but increasingly also a city of pages. Merchants calculate, officials record, contracts specify, workshops sketch, printers reproduce. Leonardo reads, asks, draws, measures, and returns to what he can verify with his own eyes. There is little reason to separate these activities. A mathematical problem may alter the way he sees a form. A painted shadow may raise a question about optics. A question about light may return him to geometry. A curve discovered in water may reappear in hair. The repeated forms do not necessarily prove that nature is offering a single hidden answer. They reveal something simpler and perhaps more important. The same observer is looking. The room grows quiet for a moment. Outside, a cart passes and the sound enters through the window. The wheels are hard against stone, not the smooth roll familiar to later streets. Their rhythm is uneven. The horse carrying or pulling the load adds another pattern beneath it. The heavier interruption of hooves, then voices, then distance. The sound fades. A softer noise remains closer at hand, pigment against stone. An apprentice works the material in measured circles. To prepare certain colors requires patience before the master ever touches a brush. Powder must become fine enough to mix. Oil must bind it into paint. Some pigments are common, others are expensive enough that their use becomes part of the economics of an image. Ultramarine, derived from costly imported stone, is not simply blue. It is wealth transformed into color. Cinnabar offers another intensity. Ochres come from earth. Verdigris provides green through a substance that demands care. Bone black turns burned organic material into darkness. A Renaissance painting gathers geography into itself without announcing it. Stone from one place, wood from another, oil from pressed seeds or nuts, metal tools, animal glue, plant fibers within paper, the hands of apprentices, the money of patrons, the calculation of merchants, the light of Florence. All of it can meet within a few inches of painted surface. That is part of the quiet truth of making things. No object belongs entirely to the person whose name history later attaches to it. Leonardo may design, observe, alter, paint, and draw, but his world remains full of other hands. Salai is among those long associated with his household and working life. Apprentices and assistants come and go through such environments, carrying materials, learning procedures, taking instruction, making mistakes, repeating actions until they become familiar. One can imagine the workshop not as a shrine to genius, but as a place where work accumulates. A stool shifts against the floor. A container is opened. A brush is placed down. Something is searched for among papers. Dust settles where it will have to be swept later. And Leonardo's attention moves again. The human face has brought him toward light. Light brings him toward the eye. The eye brings him toward the question of seeing. What is actually visible, and what does the mind complete for itself? Distance is one answer. A building across an open space does not appear with the same clarity as a hand held before the face. Air intervenes. Changes color, loses force. Edges soften. Leonardo understands that depth can be suggested not only through measured perspective, but through atmosphere itself. The farther world becomes quieter to the eye. Perhaps this is why the landscapes associated with his paintings can feel as though they are receding into something larger than ordinary distance. Roads, water, rock, and haze seem less like decoration than continuations of his curiosity. Florence offers landscape even when its streets are dense. Beyond the walls, Tuscany rises and folds into hills. The country around the city contains cultivated land, trees, paths, stone, streams, exposed earth, and distant ridges whose appearance changes with moisture and light. Closer to the city, the Arno remains the most persistent moving line. Its surface is never entirely one color. Under strong light, brightness scatters across it. Beneath cloud, the water darkens. After rain, the character of the river changes again. Sediment alters tone. Currents become more visible around obstacles. For someone interested in appearance, the river teaches light. For someone interested in mechanics, it teaches force. For someone interested in landscape, it teaches erosion. For someone interested in time, it teaches that form can exist without permanence. The thought need not be written down to belong to the world we are walking through. The river simply moves. Nearby, Florentine life continues along practical routes. Mills use water as power. Goods cross bridges. People approach the river because work requires it. The Arno is not a picturesque ribbon placed there for painters. It belongs to the functioning body of the city. That body has less pleasant odors as well. Where waste reaches water, the air can grow sour. Trades performed near the river may carry sharp smells. Dampness rises from stone and earth. Horses leave their traces behind. Smoke from hearths hangs briefly before thinning. Then someone passes carrying food, and the air changes again. Bread, cooked onions, perhaps cheese, perhaps wine poured somewhere out of sight. Meals in this city belong to social position, season, availability, and household means. There is no surviving record that allows us to follow Leonardo through a precisely documented meal on this particular imagined day. And there is no need to create one. It is enough to let Florence eat around him. A worker breaks bread. A merchant pauses. A household prepares food. Wine is diluted and shared. Vegetables, grains, legumes, cheese, eggs, meat, and fish move through markets according to circumstance and means. The city transforms sunlight into hunger as surely as any other place inhabited by human beings. And after food, work resumes. The rhythm is ordinary. That ordinariness protects us from turning Leonardo into something unreal. He is surrounded by people who are not thinking about future centuries. The apprentice grinding pigment does not know that tourists will one day travel across oceans to stand before Leonardo's paintings. The official carrying documents into the Palazzo della Signoria does not know which page historians will later reproduce. The person passing along the Arno does not know that Leonardo's studies of water will one day be examined in museums and libraries. They are simply inside their own present. This is perhaps the most difficult thing to recover from history, not facts, presentness. To them, 1504 is not the Renaissance. it is now. Michelangelo is not yet a figure in an art history survey. He is a living Florentine presence, young, difficult, celebrated, working. Machiavelli is not yet a name reduced to a political adjective. He is an official within the Republic, moving through the same civic machinery that shapes commissions, correspondence, war, and administration. Piero Soderini is not a paragraph. He governs. The Republic is not a historical category. It must survive decisions made this year, this month, this day. And Leonardo's papers are not treasures. They are work. Somewhere among those sheets, a practical reminder may sit beside a problem that later readers will find astonishing. This mixture is important. It prevents the mind from becoming too clean. Real thought rarely arrives already organized into subjects. A need interrupts a theory. An expense interrupts a drawing. A name is remembered in the margin. A calculation fails. A figure is begun and left unfinished. Leonardo's surviving paper world often carries this restless intimacy. The sheet does not ask him to become one thing: painter, engineer, observer, geometer, designer. Each label is useful later, when historians arrange a life. But the hand does not need the labels while it works. It simply moves from problem to problem. Perhaps a piece of cloth lies nearby. For a painter, folded fabric is an education in gravity. Cloth falls because weight pulls it downward, but it does not fall in one simple line. It catches against the body beneath it. Folds gather. Tension forms where fabric is held and relaxes where it is free. The same curiosity that makes a fold worth drawing can make water worth watching. Both reveal invisible forces through visible shape. A hanging cloth shows gravity. A stream shows resistance. Smoke shows air. Hair reveals motion. Muscle reveals effort. The world keeps making the invisible visible. Leonardo watches. Outside, the angle of the sunlight begins to change. It is still far from darkness, yet the day has turned subtly away from its brightest point. Shadows lengthen almost imperceptibly along certain walls. The color of stone warms where the sun reaches it obliquely. Inside, the quality of window light shifts with the hour. This matters if a painted transition is so fine that a small change in illumination alters what the eye perceives. The Mona Lisa waits within that delicate territory. There is an irony in how familiar the face will become. Future viewers will approach it already knowing what they expect to see. They will arrive with reproductions in memory. They will search for the smile because they have been told to search for it. They will carry centuries of interpretation into the room. But Leonardo has no such burden. For him, the surface remains unresolved. The mouth is a problem of light. The eyes are a problem of attention. The skin is a problem of transitions. The landscape is a problem of distance. A painting can still change because it is not yet history. There is a quiet freedom in unfinished things. They do not yet have to become what the future expects, and much of Leonardo's life will remain unfinished in one sense or another. Ideas extend beyond available time. Projects change. Commissions stall. Experiments lead elsewhere. Pages hold possibilities that never become machines or buildings. Yet unfinished does not always mean failed. A drawing can preserve the value of a question even when no object follows it. A study can teach the eye even if no final work survives. The afternoon city itself is unfinished from moment to moment. A wall is repaired. A shop changes hands. A child grows into an apprentice. A tree outside the city walls adds another ring beneath its bark. The river removes material from one bank and deposits it elsewhere. Florence is always becoming a slightly different Florence. Leonardo's interest in branching forms belongs comfortably in such a world. Trees divide from trunk to limb, from limb to smaller branch, from branch to twig. Their structure appears irregular at first, yet repeated relationships can be observed within the apparent disorder. Nature does not draw with ruler, straight obedience. It organizes through variation. A branch bends toward available light. Leaves respond to season. Roots disappear into soil while the visible structure reaches outward. A tree becomes another kind of diagram, one grown rather than drawn. Nearer the river, reeds and other plants respond to moving air. Farther into the surrounding countryside, cultivated land follows human intention more visibly. Fields, paths, walls, and water management bring geometry into the earth. Leonardo is attentive to both forms, the geometry humans impose and the patterns nature produces without them. The distinction can become thin. A canal is made by people but carries water according to physical laws that no government can repeal. A bridge is designed, but gravity remains indifferent to politics. A painted face is artificial, but the light represented upon it must convince an eye trained by nature. This may be why the Republic can employ an artist for problems that seem, to a later world, to belong to entirely different professions. In Leonardo's Florence, those boundaries are less rigid. Military engineering requires drawing. Cartography requires observation. Architecture requires geometry. Painting requires knowledge of bodies, materials, light, distance, and structure. To understand one field deeply is to find entrances into others. A distant bell interrupts the thought. Then another. The sound travels above roofs more freely than a person can travel through the streets below. Florence hears itself in bells. The same bronze voice reaches workshops, households, churches, government rooms, markets, and people crossing the river. Everyone receives the sound from a different place, yet for a moment they share the same vibration. Leonardo's hand may pause. Or perhaps it does not, but the sound belongs to his city. As the resonance fades, smaller noises return: conversation, tools, a door, a horse, water, paper shifting beneath fingers, the almost dry scratch of chalk. The city does not become silent merely because one listens closely. It becomes layered, and the eye behaves in much the same way. Look at the painted face, and one may first see the whole. Look longer and the whole dissolves into smaller decisions. Shadow beside the mouth. A transition beneath an eye. The soft boundary between cheek and surrounding air. Hair meeting fabric. Landscape receding beyond the figure. Look still longer, and paint becomes substance again. Oil, pigment panel, human labor. Perhaps all careful observation performs this double movement. The world becomes more mysterious as it becomes more material. Water is beautiful, and then it is current and resistance. A bird is graceful, and then it is feathers, weight, air, and force. A face is familiar, and then it is light moving across changing surfaces. A city is magnificent from a distance, and then it is mud, stone, smoke, voices, sweat, food, waste, commerce, bells, laws, and thousands of private lives. Leonardo's Florence does not lose wonder when examined closely. It gains texture. The sun has moved farther west. Brightness still lies on upper walls, while some streets below have already returned to shade. The stone underfoot has absorbed the day's warmth in places exposed to light, while interior rooms remain cooler. Someone closes a book. Someone turns a page. A compass is folded shut. An apprentice gathers ground pigment. The river continues past the city, and on another sheet, among calculations, curves, practical marks, and unfinished questions, water begins to appear not merely as something that flows through Florence, but as a force whose path might be measured, redirected, and perhaps made to serve the designs of a republic still struggling with the city of Pisa downstream. The river has already begun to carry that possibility away from Florence, not in the sense of disappearance, but of direction. Water leaving the city does not cease to belong to it. It becomes part of everything downstream: mills, fields, crossings, commerce, contested territory, distant banks, the routes by which goods and people move toward the sea. What passes beneath a bridge in Florence may later touch land claimed by Pisa, and so a current that seems indifferent to human affairs becomes entangled with them simply by continuing to flow. Leonardo understands that movement can become strategy. The Arno is not a line drawn cleanly across a map. It bends, widens, narrows, deposits, erodes. Rain changes it. Season changes it. Obstructions alter it. Human construction modifies its banks, but never abolishes the laws by which water behaves. To imagine redirecting such a river is therefore to imagine negotiating with something that cannot be ordered in the way a regiment can. The plan associated with Florence's struggle against Pisa is ambitious: to alter the course of water in ways that might weaken the city's access and advantage. Leonardo becomes involved in surveying, mapping, and hydraulic thinking connected to these larger Florentine concerns. There is nothing simple about transferring a river from thought into earth. A line on paper weighs nothing. A canal in the landscape requires soil to be cut, removed, carried, stabilized. Slopes must be understood. Water must be persuaded by gravity. Workers must labor through heat, mud, rain, and resistance from the land itself. The difference between drawing and construction is the difference between possibility and weight. Leonardo's pages are full of that threshold. On paper, Earth can be lifted by machines more elegantly than tired bodies may manage in reality. A gear can rotate without splintering. A canal can hold its shape. The drawn mechanism does not suffer from worn rope, imperfect timber, mud, fatigue, cost, or disagreement. And yet drawing remains indispensable because it allows the mind to test the world before the world is changed. A map opens. The landscape becomes smaller. Hills flatten into signs. Roads become lines. Rivers become ribbons of ink. Settlements become names, placed carefully in relation to one another. To stand above the earth in this way, mentally, if not physically, is to discover another kind of vision. Leonardo's birds' eye maps are striking because they combine measurement with imagination. They offer the viewer a perspective no ordinary person can inhabit continuously, a view in which valleys, waterways, ridges, roads, and towns can be understood together. The same mind that studies a single eyelid can widen its attention until an entire region enters the page. Nearness and distance become partners. A face, a river basin, a horse's leg, a chain of hills, a machete. What changes is scale. The patience required to look does not. A finger follows the line of a river drawn in ink. The movement is quiet. But beyond the paper, there are men who must cross those banks, governments that must defend them, merchants whose fortunes depend upon routes, and laborers who may one day be asked to move enormous quantities of earth because someone first imagined the path with a pen. This is where politics enters Leonardo's world most naturally. Not through speeches, through consequences. Florence's long conflict with Pisa is felt in plans, in taxation, in military concerns, in engineers sent to examine terrain, in officials comparing information, in the persistent desire for access toward the sea. Niccolo Machiavelli works within this same republican machinery. The exact texture of every interaction between Machiavelli and Leonardo cannot be reconstructed, and there is no need to seat them together in an invented conversation. Their paths intersect through the needs of Florence, through administration, engineering, territory, and war. The Republic creates a space in which a secretary and an artist engineer can be drawn toward the same problem from different directions. The river continues between them. Perhaps that is enough. By now the afternoon has softened. The sun still reaches the roofs, but the harshest brightness has begun to lose its edge. The air over the Arno carries warmth, though shadows beneath bridges are cooler. Water touches stone supports and moves around them with small changes in pressure and direction. A person standing on the bank may see only a shimmer. Leonardo looks for structure inside the shimmer. Water meeting resistance curls back upon itself. Small circular motions form along a larger current. One vortex gives way to another. There are shapes that appear briefly and disappear before the hand could possibly copy every stage. So the observer must do something more than imitate. He must understand enough to compress motion into a line. This is one of the quiet miracles of drawing. A page is still. Water is not. Yet a few curves can persuade the mind to remember movement. The same problem appears again in the air. A bird crosses the river. There is no need to make it a particular species, or to claim Leonardo stands beneath it at this exact moment. What matters is that bird flight belongs unmistakably to the questions occupying him in these years. By 1505, he is studying the mechanics of flight with concentrated attention. A wing is not a symbol of freedom on the page. It is a physical structure. Feathers overlap. Air offers resistance. Weight must be supported. The body adjusts. A wing changes angle. Movement through air leaves no visible channel behind, yet the consequences of that invisible medium can be observed in every correction the bird makes. Leonardo's interest lies precisely there, in the invisible revealed by motion. Water makes force visible through turbulence. Cloth makes gravity visible through folds. A bird makes air visible through flight. The human body makes effort visible through tension. The world seems full of hidden things, announcing themselves through surfaces. The afternoon sky over Florence offers a wide field for such thinking. Beyond the denser streets, the openness above the Arno makes movement easier to notice. Swallows and other birds pass through the air. Clouds drift beyond them. Smoke rises from chimneys and bends with currents that cannot be seen directly. A feather responds to what the eye cannot see. Smoke responds to what the eye cannot see. Perhaps all observation begins with accepting that much of reality is known only through what it causes. Leonardo's pages gather these effects patiently. A wing, a spiral, a lever, a flowing current. Not inventions in the modern sense of finished machines, waiting to be built by a future century, but investigations into how movement might be understood, imitated, redirected, or transformed. Later generations will be tempted to call many of his drawings prophetic. They will search for helicopters, tanks, robots, engines, things that appear to reach toward a technological future. But the quieter truth is more interesting. Leonardo is not sitting in Florence dreaming of our world. He is living completely inside his own. His materials are wood, rope, cloth, iron, paper, leather, water, muscle, gravity. His mechanisms belong to the workshops and engineering traditions of his century, even when his imagination stretches beyond what those workshops can reliably produce. A gear tooth has to be cut. A rope has to bear weight. A timber beam has to survive stress. A human being has to supply force somewhere. The future does not power these drawings. The present does. Inside a workshop, wood can be shaped into models. Pulleys can be examined. Gears can be turned by hand. A linkage can be tested in small form before it is imagined at larger scale. The smell of cut wood joins oil, charcoal, and pigment. Metal feels colder than the surrounding air. Rope is rough against skin. Mechanics is tactile before it becomes theoretical. Leonardo's curiosity rarely floats free of this material world. He wants to know what things do, how they move, how they fail, where resistance appears, how force changes direction. A lever turns strength into another kind of strength. A pulley redirects effort. A wheel reduces one problem and introduces another. The same kind of practical reasoning applies to lifting earth, raising materials, moving water, turning mills, and designing machines that remain only on paper. Outside, the city already contains countless mechanisms without calling attention to them. Doors turn on hinges. Mill wheels respond to current. Carts transfer weight onto axles. Ropes lift goods. Cranks turn. Presses apply force. Bells swing because weight and momentum allow them to. The ordinary city is a mechanical education. Even a bridge offers lessons. Stone presses downward. Arches redirect force. Water pushes against piers. Loads pass overhead. The bridge survives because materials and geometry have reached an agreement. People cross without thinking about it. A merchant steps from one side of the Arno to the other. A porter follows. A horse moves carefully over the stone. Below, the water performs its own calculations without numbers. Leonardo's fascination with flow is not isolated from the human world around it. Florence depends on water-driven mills for essential work. Grain can be transformed through moving machinery. Cloth production also relies upon labor, tools, water, and organized craft. The city's economic strength is inseparable from systems that convert natural forces into useful motion. The soundscape changes near such work. Water striking structures, timber creaking, grinding, voices raised above machinery. Then, a short distance away, quieter water returning to its own rhythm. No single sound defines Florence. The city changes with each turn. Near workshops, hammers dominate. Near churches, bells and voices. Near the river, water and wheels. In government buildings, footsteps, paper, doors, conversation. In smaller streets, domestic sounds pass through open windows. A child calls. Someone empties water. A dog barks and then becomes silent. The city remains alive without needing to become dramatic. Somewhere in its civic heart stands the Palazzo della Signoria. Its stone mass is not delicate. It rises with the authority of a building made to embody government. Inside are rooms in which decisions become orders. Records, commissions, payments, obligations. One of those obligations has already drawn Leonardo toward an enormous artistic problem. The Battle of Anghiari waits, not as a completed mural, because completion will never arrive in the way the commission intended, but as studies, preparations, scale, material difficulty, and one of the great unfinished efforts of his Florentine years. The subject itself is violent, yet Leonardo's preparatory attention can be approached quietly. A horse's mouth, a neck twisted under strain, a rider's arm, a hand gripping, faces altered by effort. The study of battle becomes, paradoxically, a study of bodies, not anatomy in the later, systematic dissection sense that will occupy Leonardo more deeply in subsequent years, but the visible structure of movement, muscle under skin, tension, gesture, expression. The painter must understand enough about the body to make effort believable. A relaxed arm cannot convincingly become a straining arm without changes in form. A horse cannot appear to turn sharply if its weight remains evenly distributed. Motion demands consequence. Leonardo studies those consequences. The quietness of the drawing room and the violence represented on the paper remain strangely separate. Charcoal can describe rage without making sound. Ink can hold a collision silently. The page contains what the room does not. This distance matters. It allows us to remain within the calm rhythm of the day, even while the commission itself concerns war. Outside, Florence continues with ordinary life. Someone bargaining in a market does not stop because Leonardo is drawing a battle. Someone washing a tool does not know that the unfinished image will become famous partly because it is lost. The enormous difference between historical importance and ordinary time remains everywhere. To Leonardo, the commission is not a masterpiece from the past. It is work not yet solved. Michelangelo's presence makes the situation even more unusual. The younger artist is preparing for the Battle of Cassina, another civic-military subject intended for the same great hall. Two artists, two walls, two approaches to the human body. Later imagination will sharpen the rivalry between them until it becomes almost theatrical. The historical record does support tension between the two men, but there is no need to make every glance hostile or every shared civic space into confrontation. Their difference is already visible in the work. Michelangelo's attention turns powerfully toward monumental human form. Leonardo's attention moves among bodies, horses, expressions, atmosphere, mechanics, and motion. The city holds both. Florence does this often. It contains opposites without resolving them. Republican ideals exist alongside social hierarchy. Religious devotion beside commercial ambition. Beauty beside filth. Ancient texts beside new printing. Tradition beside experiment. Michelangelo's marble and Leonardo's smoke, softened paint occupy the same streets. The same bells pass over both. Perhaps Leonardo hears one now as he returns toward the center of the city. The day has shifted farther toward evening. The stone facades no longer receive light evenly. Upper windows still catch warm brightness, while the street below is already cooler. The sun falls at a shallower angle across roofs and towers, and the Arno reflects a richer light than it held at midday. The change is gradual enough to escape notice until one suddenly realizes how long the shadows have become. This is one of the gifts of a city built from stone. Time becomes visible on walls. A narrow strip of brightness moves. A courtyard darkens. A church facade changes color. An alley that had been hot is now cool. The same building becomes several buildings over the course of a day. For Leonardo, such transformation is more than atmosphere. It belongs to seeing. The painter who works with transitions must live inside transitions. Noon does not suddenly become evening. Brightness yields. Color warms. Contrast changes. Faces turn differently beneath the descending sun. The Arno loses one kind of reflection and gains another. Even the dust in the air becomes more visible when light arrives from the side. A man crossing a street passes briefly through a luminous haze, then returns to shadow. The effect lasts only a moment. That is enough. Much of Leonardo's work is concerned with such moments that cannot be held except through memory, drawing, and repeated observation. Flight is one of them. A bird does not freeze its wings so a human can study the exact relationship between feathers and air. Water is another. A vortex collapses, a cloud shifts, a face alters before the observer has decided what changed. The answer is to look again and again. Patience becomes a method. Perhaps this is one reason his projects so often resist simple completion. To finish is to stop changing. But observation keeps introducing another possibility. A shadow can be softened further. A mechanism can be reconsidered. A canal can be redirected. A figure can be adjusted. A question can become several questions. There is danger in romanticizing this as pure genius. Delays have practical costs. Patrons wait, governments expect work. Materials consume money. Assistants must be supported. Unfinished commissions are not always poetic to those paying for them. Leonardo lives inside those pressures too. His world contains accounts, obligations, civic expectations. The same hand that draws extraordinary forms also records expenses. Money enters art quietly. A pigment is expensive. Paper has cost. A worker must be paid. Timber has to be purchased. A project imagined at monumental scale requires resources far beyond the elegance of the first sketch. This is especially true of engineering. Redirecting a river is not a metaphor when officials consider it. Earth must move. People must dig. Tools break. Rain can undo labor. Slopes refuse incorrect calculations. Mud exhausts bodies. The physical world enforces humility. A plan may be brilliant on paper and impossible under actual conditions. Leonardo knows enough about mechanics to understand that nature does not reward intention. A machine works or does not. Water flows where terrain permits. A structure bears weight or fails. Paint adheres or deteriorates. Observation, therefore, becomes more than curiosity. It becomes respect. The river cannot be persuaded by reputation. Perhaps that is why it keeps returning to his pages. It has no regard for human importance. It will move past a palace and a workshop with the same indifference. The current does not know whether the person watching it is Leonardo da Vinci. That indifference is peaceful. For a moment, the burden of fame disappears again. There is only a man looking at water. The evening air along the Arno begins to cool. Moisture becomes more noticeable as the heat diminishes. The smell of the river grows stronger near the bank, mingling with smoke from the city and the remaining odors of work. Shops will not yet all be closed. But the rhythm has changed. A day's labor has weight by this hour. Hands are tired. Tools have been used. Clothing has absorbed dust, smoke, oil, sweat, flour, wool fibers, metal filings, or pigment according to the work performed. The city that seemed to gather itself in the morning now begins to release some of its effort. Animals are led away. Goods are counted. A merchant considers what remains unsold. An apprentice cleans a surface. A door that stood open for much of the day is pulled inward. Still, Florence is far from silent. The bells return. Their resonance enters the river valley and breaks against stone. Sound travels through spaces already filling with lengthening shadow. In churches, the air carries the smell of wax and incense. In workshops, the stronger odors of oil, glue, wood, and charcoal remain. In kitchens, food begins to replace the smells of labor. All of these layers occupy only a few streets. A person can move from sacred perfume to animal waste, from cooked food to damp stone, from the river to fresh, cut wood in the space of a short walk. Leonardo's city is not refined into one mood. It is mixed. That mixture keeps it alive. As the light becomes gentler, the appearance of the river changes once more. Reflections stretch. Buildings near the bank seem to tremble in the moving surface. The sky above them remains bright enough for birds to cross clearly. A wing turns. For an instant the underside catches light. Then the bird changes direction. No line follows it through the air. Yet somewhere in Leonardo's papers, wings, currents, spirals, and mechanisms continue to gather around the same patient desire to understand how one thing moves through another. Air around feathers, water around stone, muscle around bone, a wheel around its axle, a river through a landscape. And soon, as the city begins to draw its shutters inward and prepare for the darker hours, the movement of bodies and machines will give way to another problem Leonardo knows equally well: the problem of what remains visible when light itself begins to disappear. And so the city begins to belong more fully to shadow. Not darkness yet. There is still color in the sky. Still enough light for stone to hold warmth along its upper surfaces. Still enough brightness for the Arno to reflect broken bands of gold and pale blue. But the balance has changed. Daylight is no longer increasing or holding steady. It is withdrawing. Florence responds. A workshop that depended on the window begins to feel different before anyone speaks of closing it. Fine visual work becomes more difficult as the light weakens. The distinction between one tone and another grows less reliable. A narrow interior can darken quickly, especially where neighboring buildings block the remaining sky. Candles and oil lamps can extend activity beyond sunset, but they do not replace daylight. Their light is local. A flame illuminates what is near it and allows everything farther away to disappear. For someone interested in vision, this is another lesson. Daylight reveals by abundance. A lamp reveals by exclusion. Place a small flame beside a face, and one cheek may emerge while the other recedes. Move the flame, and the structure of the same face changes. The nose casts a different shadow. The eye socket deepens. The mouth becomes harder to read. The object remains. Only the light changes. And yet perception changes with it. Florence becomes another city under these conditions. The streets that seemed crowded with surfaces during the afternoon begin to simplify. Detail retreats. Doorways turn black. The upper edges of buildings remain visible against the sky while lower walls merge into shadow. Windows holding interior light become isolated points, each suggesting a household or workshop behind it. The city's smells grow more noticeable as vision loses authority. Smoke from cooking fires, oil, food, damp stone, animals, the river, a passing cloak carrying the odors of labor. The senses rearrange themselves. What the eye can no longer identify from a distance, the ear and nose begin to recover. A door closes. Wood strikes wood. An iron latch falls into place. Footsteps become easier to distinguish because there are fewer of them. The bells sound once more over the roofs. Their meaning belongs to religion, civic rhythm, and the practical organization of a society that does not carry precise mechanical time in every pocket. Hours are announced across space. The city's inhabitants do not need to see a clock face to know that the day is changing. A bell travels farther than lamplight. It enters rooms. It crosses the river. It reaches those still at work and those already preparing food. It passes through Leonardo's world without asking what problem lies on the page before him. This repeated sound may be one of the most constant experiences of Florence. It is difficult to imagine the city without it. The human voice changes after the bell passes. Market activity thins. Workshops complete tasks that can reasonably be finished before darker hours. Materials are gathered. Tools are cleaned or left ready for the next working period. Pigments are covered. Papers must be protected from moisture, ash, careless hands, and open flame. A sheet of paper is vulnerable. So is a painting. So is an experiment. Much of the world Leonardo tries to understand is durable in principle, but fragile in practice. Geometry survives perfectly in thought. The paper carrying it can burn. A painted image may represent a face for centuries, yet its materials respond to humidity, heat, preparation, and time. A wall can appear permanent until the surface fails. The Battle of Anghiari belongs painfully to this truth. The commission is vast enough to seem as though it ought to resist disappearance. A monumental civic hall, a republican government, a celebrated artist, a military victory selected for remembrance, preparatory studies filled with movement and force. Everything about the project sounds large. Yet much of what Leonardo intended for the wall will not survive in the form Florence expected. The exact technical history of the mural's failure remains uncertain enough that it is safer not to transform one early account into a simple mechanical story. What can be said is quieter. Leonardo experimented with an unconventional approach to wall painting. the work presented technical difficulties. The grand project remained incomplete, and over time, the image itself disappeared. That disappearance does not erase the labor that came before it. If anything, it changes the way we see that labor. A preparatory drawing suddenly matters more. A copied composition becomes a trace. A fragment of description gains weight. The lost work survives through the things around it. There is something almost fitting in this for an artist so interested in movement. The mural does not remain fixed. It passes out of sight, but the idea continues. Inside the great council hall, scale itself would have altered every ordinary working gesture. A small sheet can be turned in the hand. A monumental composition cannot. Figures intended for an enormous wall demand planning at another order of size. Scaffolding, distance, surface preparation, placement, and the physical movement of the painter all enter the process. A mark that looks correct from arm's length may behave differently when viewed from across a hall. The artist must move backward, look, move forward, adjust. The eye travels almost as much as the hand, and the hall is not silent. A large stone interior changes sound. Footsteps become longer. Voices rise and linger. Wooden structures creak. A tool placed down can strike sharply against the acoustics of the room. Even work performed quietly becomes larger because the building returns it. The Palazzo della Signoria carries other sounds as well. Government does not stop because art is being made inside its walls. Officials move through corridors. Documents pass from one hand to another. Meetings begin and end. Arguments occur beyond the painter's space. The Republic continues to decide practical matters while Leonardo tries to solve visual ones. The building contains both. Perhaps on another day, in another room, the question concerns Pisa. Perhaps taxation. Perhaps appointments. Perhaps military intelligence. Perhaps nothing that will be remembered outside a surviving record. The great machinery of civic life is built from countless decisions that never become famous. Leonardo's mural is unusual because it sits inside that machinery while commemorating another moment in Florence's political memory. A battle from 1440 becomes an image in the early 16th century. Past violence becomes present civic identity. The Republic asks paint to make memory visible. Michelangelo's competing commission belongs to the same environment. The Battle of Cassina would also turn a Florentine military episode into monumental human form. Both projects remain unfinished. Yet the idea of two extraordinary artists being asked to transform opposing military memories within the same civic hall has survived longer than either completed wall painting ever could have. There is temptation here to sharpen everything, to imagine hostility in every encounter, to make Florence hold its breath each time the two men enter the same space. But ordinary life is rarely arranged so theatrically. Leonardo and Michelangelo did inhabit the same Florentine world, and tension between them is supported by the historical tradition around their interactions. Their artistic temperaments differ. Their reputations are already substantial. Their generations are different. That is enough. One need not add invented confrontations. The contrast between their materials already speaks quietly. Michelangelo has spent years drawing form from stone. Leonardo often lets form dissolve into atmosphere. One removes material, the other layers it. One can reveal a body by cutting marble away. The other can create a face by allowing almost invisible transitions of paint to accumulate. Stone gives resistance directly. Paint gives resistance through patience. The body appears by opposite methods. Florence holds both. In 1504, the city also has to decide what to do with Michelangelo's David. The marble figure is too important, too large, too publicly charged simply to be placed without debate. A committee of artists and citizens considers the question of its location. Leonardo is among those involved. There is something wonderfully grounded in this moment. A work that future centuries will treat as inevitable is, in its own time, still a practical problem. Where should it stand? How should it be seen? What relationship should it have to public space? A statue must occupy actual ground. It casts a shadow. Rain will touch it. People must walk around it. Its meaning changes depending on what building rises behind it and what route brings viewers toward it. Art is not finished when the carving stops. Place becomes part of the work. Leonardo would understand this. He has already spent years thinking about relation. Figure to background, water to bank, machine to force, building to terrain, city to river. The placement of a statue is another version of the same question. How does one thing exist beside another? The sky above Florence continues to darken. The David itself does not need to appear before us as a shining symbol. It is enough to imagine the weight of marble standing in the same city, where thin paper sheets carry Leonardo's notes. One material can survive weather. Another must be protected from a drop of water. Yet history sometimes preserves the fragile sheet and loses the monumental wall. Permanence does not always obey scale. A tiny notation in ink may outlive a palace interior. A casual drawing may become the only surviving clue to a vanished project. A wooden panel small enough to be carried may become more famous than a mural intended to dominate a civic hall. The future rearranges value. No one inside 1504 can know how. This ignorance makes the present feel more alive. Leonardo does not know which sheets will survive. He does not know which questions future readers will admire. He does not know which abandoned project will later be called visionary. He works without that audience. The day's final natural light reaches stone in narrow places. The Arno has lost much of its reflected brightness. The water is darker now, but movement can still be heard. Sound beneath a bridge becomes more important than sight. The current brushes stone. A small disturbance curls away. Somewhere a rope tightens. A boat or working craft shifts against its mooring. The river does not become invisible all at once. It becomes less detailed. The same happens to the hills beyond Florence. Their individual forms merge into a larger silhouette. Distance simplifies first. Nearby roofs remain visible. Far ridges become one shape. Then the sky above them slowly deepens. Leonardo's interest in atmospheric distance belongs naturally to this hour. The farther world loses contrast. Edges soften. Colors weaken. A landscape recedes not simply because objects become smaller, but because air itself changes what reaches the eye. The principle enters painting. Distant forms cannot be treated like objects held close to the face. The world grows quieter as it withdraws. Perhaps that is why Leonardo's backgrounds often seem to lead beyond the sitter into a realm difficult to locate precisely. Water, rock, roads, atmosphere. The landscape is not merely behind the person. It continues the person's presence into a larger natural world. Here in Florence, such continuity exists outside the painting as well. The city is dense, but nature remains close enough to insist upon itself. The river cuts through the walls. Weather enters every street. Wind arrives from beyond the city. Rain darkens stone. Heat gathers between buildings. Winter cold enters rooms despite heavy doors. Fog can rise along the Arno. Clouds cross above civic towers without regard for human boundaries. Leonardo's study of nature, therefore, does not require withdrawal from society. Nature is already inside the city. Water powers mills. Wood becomes beams. Stone becomes walls. Animal hide becomes glue or leather. Plant fibers become paper. Minerals become pigment. Fire changes substances. Human craft is built almost entirely from transformations of natural material. The workshop is another landscape. A piece of wood remembers a tree in its grain. A chalk stick is geology placed between fingers. Metal remembers ore and furnace. Oil carries the smell of crushed plant material. Paper comes from fibers processed until their earlier form is almost impossible to recognize. The painter works with transformed nature to imitate nature again. It is a circle Leonardo might appreciate. A tree becomes a panel. The panel receives a landscape containing trees. Stone becomes pigment. Pigment becomes skin. Oil becomes light. Matter changes identity without ceasing to be matter. The lamp flame inside a room offers another transformation. Oil rises through a wick. Fire consumes. Light spreads. Smoke forms. The flame is small enough to be disturbed by a draft, yet powerful enough to alter the whole emotional character of a space. Under lamplight, paper warms in color. White is no longer white. Ink seems darker. Metal catches brief points of brightness. A compass may flash at one edge and vanish into shadow at the other. The hand itself becomes dramatic without intending to. Knuckles brighten. Fingers disappear. The wrist passes through alternating bands of light and darkness as it moves. Working by such illumination is possible, but fine visual judgment becomes difficult. It is easy for modern imagination to make the candlelit studio romantic. The reality is more physical. Smoke, heat near the flame, poor illumination, risk of fire, fatigue in the eyes. shadows falling exactly where one wishes to see. Beeswax can burn more cleanly, but it is costly. Tallow candles are cheaper and less pleasant. Olive oil lamps offer another common source of illumination. Every flame has a material price. Night does not arrive with convenient light. One must make light deliberately, and so a household's darkness partly reveals its resources. A wealthy interior may sustain more illumination. A poor room may depend upon a single small flame and the fire already needed for warmth or cooking. Outside, most streets remain dark. There is no continuous public glow. Travel after sunset becomes a different activity from walking during the day. One may carry a light. One may rely upon moonlight when available. One may listen more carefully. Municipal guards patrol. Doors are secured. The city's walls and gates acquire another meaning after dark. During the day they define Florence. At night they contain it. The heavy gates that regulate movement in and out of the city are not abstractions. They are wood, metal, stone, hinges, guards, schedules. A traveler arriving too late does not simply pass through because the road continues. Time and architecture cooperate to stop him. Inside the walls, the population withdraws unevenly. Taverns continue to hold voices. Religious communities maintain their own rhythms. Some workshops may finish late. Servants move between rooms. Meals continue. But the open commercial city has largely folded itself inward. The private city takes over. Behind shutters, families share food. Firelight touches walls. Clothing is loosened. Shoes come off. Children grow quieter. A day's labor settles into the body. The sounds of the street become less continuous and therefore more distinct. A distant horse. A guard. A burst of laughter from somewhere unseen. A dog barking. Then silence large enough for the river to return. Leonardo belongs to this quieter Florence too, but caution matters. No surviving record allows us to reconstruct a precise evening and claim that at this hour he sat in a specific chair, eating a specific food before opening a specific notebook. We can only remain within the possibilities the evidence allows. His papers show sustained habits of writing, drawing, calculation, observation, and practical note-taking. The city around him provides lamps, rooms, assistants, materials, bells, weather, and darkness. The rest must remain unforced. There is comfort in leaving some doors closed. History does not become weaker when we admit that we cannot see inside every room. Sometimes the darkness is part of the truth. What we can see are the traces that later emerge from it. One trace concerns the moon. Leonardo's attention extends upward as naturally as it extends toward water. The moon raises questions of light, reflection, and appearance. Its brightness does not originate in the same way as the flame of a lamp. It receives light, its surface, shadows, and relationship to the earth become problems for observation rather than symbols alone. The sky offers another laboratory without walls. No pigment can reproduce it exactly. No ruler can touch it. Yet its changing appearance can be examined. Cloud, moon, stars, the fading color after sunset. Even darkness has gradations. Florence beneath a clear sky is not the same city as Florence beneath cloud. Moonlight can reveal rooflines and stone surfaces in muted form. Cloud can erase them. Rain can multiply small sounds and make streets shine around whatever light survives. Winter wind can drive people inward. Summer night can release heat stored through the day. Season changes the body's relationship with darkness. The research does not require us to select one exact historical date for this representative journey. That freedom allows the city to remain truthful without pretending to preserve an impossible diary. The air can cool as the light fades. Stone can lose heat. Moisture from the river can become more apparent. These are not inventions about Leonardo. They are qualities of the place that held him. And the place matters as much as the person. A famous life can become distorted when the surrounding world is removed. Leonardo without Florence becomes a sequence of isolated achievements. Put Florence back around him, and the achievements become activities. The Mona Lisa becomes a wooden panel among real materials. The Battle of Anghiari becomes a civic commission inside a political building. Maps become tools within territorial conflict. Flight studies become lines made while birds still cross ordinary Tuscan skies. Geometry becomes paper touched by a hand. Engineering becomes timber, rope, water, labor, and cost. Even rivalry becomes two human beings moving through the same streets instead of two names placed beside each other in a book. The night helps return them to human scale. Fame has difficulty surviving darkness. Once the city's great buildings become silhouettes, palazzo and workshop are both only shapes. A celebrated artist and an apprentice both need light to see. A magistrate and a laborer both feel winter cold. The river is indifferent to title. The bell reaches everyone. Perhaps this is one of the quieter truths architecture cannot conceal. Daylight makes hierarchy visible. Clothing, facades, public position, marble. Heraldry, ceremony. Darkness removes detail. It does not erase inequality, but it makes human bodies more alike to the eye. A person becomes movement, a lamp becomes location, a voice becomes presence. Florence grows less decorative and more elemental: stone, water, fire, air, sound. And among those elements, Leonardo's habit of observation continues to make sense. He has spent so much of his working life looking for what remains beneath appearance. Not because appearance is false, but because it is constantly changing. A face shifts with light, a river shifts with current, a city shifts with hour, a work of art shifts with location, a wall painting can vanish, a paper can survive, an idea can change form several times before becoming anything at all. There is no need to force philosophy upon these things. They are already saying enough. The flame shortens as oil is consumed. A shadow lengthens across a table. Somewhere beneath it, the edge of a paper disappears. A line remains visible only where the light reaches. On another part of the page, darkness has already taken it. Perhaps the hand moves the sheet closer. Perhaps another lamp is lit. Perhaps work ends. We do not know. Outside, Florence continues its nightly transformation. The last open doors become fewer. The air along the Arno cools. The stones of the bridge no longer glow with stored sunlight. Voices travel farther because there are fewer of them. A guard's steps emerge, vanish, and return from another street. The river carries darkness through the city just as easily as it carried morning light. Water does not need illumination to continue. Its movement remains even when no one watches. And somewhere in that darkened Florence, the materials of another working day have been left waiting: poplar wood, paper, chalk, ink, metal, pigments, rope, stone, and questions still without answers, ready to receive whatever light returns. And before any new light arrives, the city remains suspended in that quieter state. Florence has not stopped. It has only changed the scale of its movement. The broad gestures of the day have disappeared. No market now seems to define a square. No workshop doorway presents its work to the street. No sunlight separates every edge of stone from every other. The city continues through smaller signs. A lamp, a voice behind a shutter, a footstep crossing a lane, the faint scrape of wood, a dog answering another sound from somewhere beyond sight. Water beneath the bridges. These are enough. Night does not erase Florence. It reduces it to essentials. And in that reduction, the city becomes easier to hear. The Arno remains the most patient sound of all. Its movement does not need to announce itself. In darkness, the river seems almost larger because the eye can no longer measure its full width. One hears the water touching stone, shifting around the supports of bridges, loosening itself from one bank and pressing softly against another. The current continues toward places hidden beyond the walls, toward territory, toward Pisa, toward the sea. Yet here at this hour, the river has lost much of its political meaning. No map is spread across it. No canal is being argued into existence. No official is measuring it. It simply moves. There is something deeply restful in allowing a thing to exist without asking it to become useful. Leonardo's world is full of attempts to understand usefulness: machines, hydraulic plans, surveying, materials, geometry. But observation often begins before usefulness enters. A bird does not have to become a flying machine to be worth studying. Water does not need to become a canal to be worth watching. A face does not need to become a portrait to be worth noticing. The act of looking can come first, and perhaps that is the thread that holds these years together more gently than any list of achievements. Leonardo looks at structure, at movement, at light, at surfaces, at things changing. The city around him rewards such attention because it changes constantly. A wall that appeared pale at noon becomes nearly black at night. A narrow alley that seemed unpleasant under afternoon heat can grow cool and still. The Arno that reflected the sky hours earlier now carries only fragments of moonlight when the sky allows it. Even stone seems softer when its edges disappear. The air itself feels different against the skin. Moisture from the river becomes more noticeable. In colder seasons, the night can sharpen enough to push people toward thicker wool, enclosed rooms, braziers, and shared warmth. In warmer seasons, the cooling air offers relief after stone has stored the heat of the day. There is no single Florentine night. Season changes it. Weather changes it. Cloud changes it. Wind from the Apennines can harden the air. Rain can make the streets glisten around small pools of lamplight. Fog can gather near the river and shorten the world until towers, bridges, and distant facades become partial shapes. Leonardo knows this variability because painting depends upon it. Light is never independent of air. Distance changes under moisture. Color changes beneath cloud. A landscape becomes another landscape before the ground itself has moved. Perhaps the hills outside Florence disappear completely tonight. Perhaps only the nearest rooflines remain. History does not preserve the exact weather of this representative journey, so there is no need to choose falsely. It is enough to know the range of the city: cold stone, warm stone, rain, darkened stone, stone under moonlight, stone beneath soot. The material remains. Appearance changes. That relationship between permanence and change lies everywhere in Leonardo's work. A poplar panel is solid, but the image upon it depends on almost weightless layers. A stone building appears permanent, but its interior purposes change. A drawing captures motion, but the paper does not move. A river is always there, yet none of its water remains. A human face feels familiar, though no expression stays fixed. The world is stable only from far enough away. Come closer, and everything becomes process. The lamp inside a Florentine room burns lower. Oil is being consumed. The wick darkens at its edge. A small flame responds to a current of air too weak to feel against the skin. Its shadow shifts across a wall. The movement is slight. Still, it changes everything nearby. A folded paper becomes bright at one corner. A wooden surface catches a warm reflection. Metal responds with a sharp point of light. Ink disappears where the page curves away. It is easy to understand why daylight remains precious for fine work. Night requires compromise. The human eye adjusts. Objects become more familiar through touch. A hand knows where a tool rests before the tool becomes fully visible. The roughness of paper, the smooth edge of a panel, the cold surface of metal, the small resistance of a drawer. Touch carries knowledge when sight weakens. Leonardo's working life is filled with such physical knowledge. No amount of thought removes the hand from the process. A compass must be opened, a quill must be cut, pigment must be ground, a wooden panel must be prepared, paper must be held flat, a rope must be pulled, a model must stand. A measurement must begin somewhere real. Even the most abstract geometry enters the world through pressure. Point against surface, line across paper. The hand turns the invisible into marks. And the marks remain after the hand has moved away. This is why his surviving sheets feel intimate in a way finished monuments often do not. They preserve hesitation, correction, direction, a thought approaching clarity. Sometimes an unfinished line reveals more about attention than a completed image reveals about certainty. Leonardo leaves many such traces. Not all are explanations. Some are questions. Some are reminders. Some are fragments. Some are diagrams whose purpose remains debated. Later centuries will try to organize them into a coherent mind, but perhaps the mind itself was never coherent in that tidy sense. Curiosity does not move in straight lines. It branches, it returns, it forgets, it repeats differently. It leaves one problem for another, and then finds that the second has quietly led back to the first. A river becomes geometry. Geometry becomes mechanics. Mechanics returns to water. A wing becomes air. Air becomes resistance. Resistance becomes force. Force becomes movement. Movement becomes the body. The body becomes painting. Painting becomes light. Light becomes the eye, and the eye returns to observation. Nothing is truly separate for long. That is why Leonardo belongs so naturally inside this living Florentine world. The city behaves in the same way. A church is also architecture, sound, finance, memory, craft, wax, stone, ritual, and labor. A bridge is also traffic, water, engineering, trade, weather, mud, politics, and daily habit. A painting is also wood, pigment, oil, money, patronage, workshop hierarchy, eyesight, patience, and time. A government hall is also echoes, footsteps, scaffolding, disputes, stone dust, civic ambition, and unfinished art. Florence does not divide itself into subjects. Neither does Leonardo. This is not because he stands outside his century. It is because he is deeply inside it. He depends upon its materials, its patrons, its political needs, its books, its artisans, its languages, its limitations, its roads, its conflicts, its workshops, its rivers. He is often described by later generations as a man ahead of his time. But such language can quietly remove him from the very world that made him possible. The more peaceful way to see him is not as someone who escaped the Renaissance. It is as someone who entered it very deeply, so deeply that he noticed things others passed without stopping. The current around a stone, the way branches divide, the way shadows soften, the way a face changes under effort, the way distance turns color quieter, the way wings answer air, the way water gathers into spirals. These are not futuristic objects. They are present things. The future enters only later, through people who look backward and discover familiar shapes in unfamiliar pages. Leonardo himself does not know what a helicopter will be. He does not know what modern anatomy will become. He does not know how engines will transform travel. He does not know that reproductions of the Mona Lisa will one day appear almost everywhere. He does not know that fragments of his handwriting will become objects of global fascination. He only knows the questions available to him. That is enough. The night grows deeper. The city walls hold a quieter population now. Florence's gates have their own rhythm of closure and control. Movement in and out becomes more restricted after dark. Guards and watchmen become more visible in a city where darkness is not softened by continuous public lighting. Their footsteps may pass through a street and vanish beyond a corner. The sound of iron or wood carried with them may briefly accompany the rhythm. Then the street belongs to silence again. Behind walls, ordinary life continues. Some people are already asleep, some are finishing meals, some remain awake beside a fire or small lamp. Religious houses continue their own ordered routines. Taverns may still hold voices. An animal shifts in a stable. A servant checks a latch. A merchant considers tomorrow. An apprentice feels the ache of work in his hands. No one experiences the city in exactly the same way. And Leonardo's fame does not exempt him from the ordinary physical conditions they share. He too depends upon warmth when the air is cold. He too needs light to see. He too eats, tires, ages, pays, waits, and works within the hours available to a body. This return to physical scale matters. There is a temptation to imagine genius as something almost disembodied, a mind moving endlessly from idea to idea. But the hand becomes tired, the eyes become tired, the neck stiffens, the room cools. A material refuses to behave. A payment is delayed. A commission does not progress. A project changes direction. A father dies. In 1504, Leonardo loses his father, Piero da Vinci. The surviving record does not allow us to turn that loss into a private monologue or assign feelings that were never written down. There is no need. Death enters human life without requiring interpretation. It alters relationships. It creates practical consequences. Inheritance and family tensions follow. Another thread is added to a life already crowded with civic commissions, art, engineering, money, assistance, and questions. The extraordinary and ordinary continue together. A man can study the motion of water and still become involved in family disputes. He can imagine large hydraulic works and still need to keep track of expenses. He can observe distant landscapes and still live inside immediate obligations. No amount of curiosity removes the friction of being human. Perhaps this is one reason the surviving notebooks feel so alive. Great questions sit beside practical notes. There is no wall between wonder and inconvenience. The page accepts both. Outside, another bell moves over Florence. At night, its sound seems larger. Fewer competing noises remain. The bronze resonance settles through the air, touches roofs, passes across the Arno, and slowly thins. For a moment, the entire city seems held inside the vibration. Then the sound is gone. Only memory proves it existed. The same is true of so much human experience. A spoken sentence disappears. A footstep disappears. A life disappears. Yet sometimes a trace remains. Ink, stone, wood, a copied image, a record in an archive, a name, a portrait. The past survives unevenly. We know some things about Leonardo because someone wrote them down. We lose others because no one did. We know about commissions because documents were preserved. We know about drawings because fragile paper escaped fire, water, neglect, reuse, and decay. We know far less about many ordinary people who lived within the same streets. Their bells were the same. Their river was the same. Their stone was the same. But their names have faded. There is no sadness required in this. It is simply the condition of history. The world was always larger than what survives from it. This journey through Leonardo's Florence has therefore never really been only about one man. It has been about a city around him, the apprentice grinding pigment, the porter crossing a bridge, the official carrying papers, the woman opening shutters, the craftsman working near the river, the merchant calculating cost, the guards moving through darkness, the people whose labor prepared surfaces on which another person's name would later become famous. Without them, Leonardo's world becomes impossible. No workshop without assistants, no pigments without trade, no paper without makers, no commissions without patrons, no maps without territory, no city without thousands of lives moving at once. The Renaissance is not made only by the people whose portraits remain. It is made by hands history never learned to name. Perhaps one of those hands prepared a panel. Another carried timber. Another cut a quill. Another mixed lime. Another repaired a bridge. Another closed a city gate after sunset. Their work exists inside the famous work, even when their identities have disappeared. The quiet of night makes room for them. It allows fame to recede again. Leonardo becomes one presence among many, a remarkable one, but still human. The Arno keeps moving through all of them. A current does not preserve names. It carries sediment, leaves, reflections, waste, rainwater, the consequences of work performed upstream. It moves beneath bridges built by people already dead and toward landscapes shaped by others not yet born. Water connects time without remembering it. Leonardo studies water, but water will outlast his study. The drawing remains still. The river continues. Soon another change begins. It is so gradual that at first it may be nothing more than a weakening of darkness toward the east. No sun is visible yet. No street has returned to full form. But night is no longer complete. The sky begins to separate itself from roof lines. The tallest structures emerge first. A tower, a church, a ridge of tiles, the edge of a bridge. Stone slowly returns from blackness into gray. The city does not wake instantly. It becomes visible before it becomes active. The Arno receives the earliest difference in light. Its surface begins to distinguish itself from the banks. The water appears again, not because it ever stopped, but because the eye has returned to it. This may be one of the simplest pleasures of dawn, the rediscovery of things that continued without us. A wall, a river, a tree, a road. The world has not waited for our attention. It simply allows itself to be seen again. Leonardo's materials would respond in the same way. A sheet that had disappeared beyond the reach of lamplight becomes pale again. Ink emerges. A curve returns. A small calculation becomes readable. A drawing of a wing separates from the paper beneath it. Metal tools catch cool morning light. The wooden panel regains its color. Pigments that looked uncertain by flame become themselves again. Daylight restores discrimination, and with it, work can begin once more. There is something fitting in returning here. Not to the exact morning with which we began, because no morning truly repeats another. The river carries different water now. The city has passed through another night. A lamp has burned down. Food has been consumed. People have slept. Some have not. Some work has been completed. Some questions remain. Most questions remain. Leonardo's Florentine years continue beyond the hours we have lived beside him. The Battle of Anghiari will remain unfinished. The Mona Lisa will continue to receive attention beyond this period. His studies of flight will deepen. His work will take him away from Florence again. By 1506, Milan will draw him northward. But there is no need to follow him there now. To do so would turn this quiet world back into a biography. Florence is enough. The few years between 1503 and 1505 are enough. A human life need not be followed from birth to death to become real. Sometimes a narrow window reveals more. A man in his early 50s has returned to a familiar city. He works, he draws, he accepts commissions, he studies, he observes, he becomes involved in the problems of a republic. He looks at water, he looks at bodies, he looks at light, he looks at birds. He places lines on paper. Some of those lines survive. That is enough to spend a little while near him. The city brightens slowly. Doors have not all opened yet, but somewhere movement begins behind one. A latch is lifted. A fire is stirred. Water is poured into a basin. A horse shifts its weight. One workshop will soon hear the first tool strike. Another will open to the street. Bread will be carried. Carts will return. Church bells will gather Florence once more into shared sound. The same rhythms will return without repeating exactly, and perhaps this is where Leonardo's attention feels most at home. Repetition with variation. Water always moving, never the same. A face remaining itself while expression changes. Branches following patterns without becoming identical. Light returning each day at another angle. A city repeating its routines through different lives. The world does not create copies. It creates continuities. One moment grows from another. That is how Florence survives in memory too, not as a frozen painting, as movement, the river, the bells, the workshop, the street, the narrowing shadow, the opening window, the smell of oil, the roughness of wool, the cold touch of metal, the soft dust of chalk, the heat trapped in summer stone, the dampness rising near the Arno, the flame bending beneath a draft, the faded edge of distant hills, and somewhere among all of these things, the quiet scratch of a left hand moving across paper from right to left. No secret code is needed. The mystery is simpler. A human being looked at the world closely enough that some of his looking survived. The sun has still not risen fully. There is only more light. Florence returns gently. A few birds begin to occupy the widening sky. One crosses above the river. Its wings alter in the moving air. From below, the motion is effortless. On paper, it would require study, but for now there is no need to understand it. The bird continues. The river continues. The city continues. And on a table somewhere within the growing light, a sheet of paper waits for the next mark.